and welcome to another episode of the Tell Not Show. As always, we're your hosts. We have the wonderful, fabulous Kirsha Fox, the author of the Deception and Justice series, including the newly released Keeper of the Demon Skull. She is a homeschooling mom of four, avid reader, and gamer.
And my co-host is Julia J.K. Allen, editor, author, and author coach. She's a fantasy and horror author who loves to put magic in everything. Thanks so much for joining us. Our guest tonight is Evelyn Wilde. Evelyn Wilde writes dark fantasy where the line between good and evil is never clear. Living with chronic pain has taught her that strength comes in many forms, not just the will to push forward, but the courage to show vulnerability and compassion for others, themes that can be found throughout her characters' journeys. Welcome.
Yes, so good to have you. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we were just talking about how great your bio is written. For someone who just wrote it right before the show, you did a wonderful job.
I had no bio written. She said, well, if you could just send one my way. And I was like, sure.
Wonderful iteration.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Some people are just born to be writers.
Or it takes an incredible amount of effort that you just don't see on the surface.
Right. It's like the duck, where it's like the ducks all calm on the water and then underneath the feet are just going like.
Right. My feet are constantly paddling, it feels like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's because I know your zodiac sign. I'm going to say that's a fire sign trait.
Aries.
Like we look put together, but then a chaos underneath, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about your writing journey. What got you started in writing? What does it look like so far?
So I started writing back in high school. I think a lot of people can relate to that, that history of starting in high school and just kind of continuing on as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
For me, I did a lot of other creative hobbies when I was in high school. I was into music. I loved drawing. So it was kind of, it kind of made sense the path of progression would end up leading me to writing eventually.
Yes.
That, and I just didn't have a lot of friends. And the friends that I did have, they were also into other creative hobbies. So we also did a lot of role playing. So that also helped a lot.
Oh, hey, it's me.
Right. All of us can relate so much. Yes. I think that, yes, the creative stuff, like all of my hobbies were like creatively geared. Like every single one of them. If it wasn't drawing, if it wasn't painting, if it wasn't crochet, like everything was about creativity.
It was music or reading or books or, something.
Yeah. Always. I love that. And yes, I feel like a lot of us got our start with like really bad writing in like middle school and high school, and then just we stuck with it, the persistence.
One of my favorite stories when people ask me like, oh, like what got you into writing in specific? And I could say, reading. Obviously, reading is part of that journey. But for me, it was back in the AOL days when my username was Unicorn Dreamer 16 and back in the lawless times of the internet, you could find role playing group chats pretty much everywhere. So having that, I think having that varied childhood of just being in that lawlessness where you could really learn anything because the internet was just becoming really big from nothing. And so suddenly all of the books that you never even heard of as a kid, you suddenly have access to.
Yes, right. Yeah, and it always made that horrible noise, screeching, and then and then heaven forbid your parents or somebody needed the phone.
Oh,
yeah. Like you're getting kicked off.
Like, I was in the middle of something and now you're booted off and you have to go.
Don't even get me started about when LimeWire was a thing, because if I had a download that had been going for an hour, it did not end well for anyone.
Well, sometimes they would literally say like 5 days left on the download, and you're just like, but you knew you were. That's what the internet was doing. It was like, this could take 5 days, or it could take 20 seconds, and you don't know. And if you get interrupted by a phone call, like you just have to start over. Yeah,
you knew you were part of the rich kids if your download only took you a couple of hours. I'm just saying, if your internet was that good.
No, I remember
you were paying
45 minutes to help to see a Foamy episode.
Like, oh my God.
Right.
We were so excited. It only took 45 minutes to watch the 5-minute Foamy episode.
Right.
Foamy and now about how spoiled we are that like what it takes me more than 5 seconds to load. I'm out of here. Like
yeah, right.
Our attention spans now comparatively it's so much worse. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about the genres you write and why you chose them.
Oh, okay. So I mostly write dark fantasy, epic fantasy, and I say the two because I don't often do a lot of really dark stuff. The dark stuff has only been recent for me, but a lot of the stuff that I touch on is more medieval world, and that is mostly because that's just where I'm most comfortable. A lot of the knowledge that I have is very specific, very niche knowledge. For example, I have a specialty in learning about medieval weaponry.
Okay.
And that's primarily because I have a lot of friends that have dedicated their lives and their careers to medieval weaponry. For example, a friend of mine, Cameron, he is a professional bowyer and fletcher. So he makes, bows.
Arrows. Yeah.
Yep. Bows and arrows. And he was trained overseas by some prolific European bowyers. They're part of like the bowyer guild and things like that.
Sure.
And so having friends like that has really given me some invaluable information, but I feel like it would be wasted at this point if I didn't use it for something.
Right. All the random facts, yes.
What is the crop yield like in medieval ages and during, June, July, and August? And that information I know. Where else am I going to use that if not for writing? So that's kind of, I prefer to write in medieval settings. The dark fantasy has only recently come into play over the last couple of years. And I think that that's pretty reflective of, well, our world the way it is now. A lot of your creative writing does have trickle effect of your real life into your creative worlds. And the world's been dark lately. So it makes sense.
Right.
Again, a natural progression of just the way things are in life. So for me, that's kind of the dark fantasy has been my new home lately.
Yeah. No, yes. I think that a lot of times fantasy is used as like a mirror to reflect what is either going on currently in society or what we're worried about is going to go on currently in society.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
So, what about your books makes it fantasy rather than historical fiction? Is there like magic and
werewolves?
Werewolves. Okay.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Werewolves, mostly werewolves. I'm very dedicated to lore heavy, almost plays on spirituality and the duality of man. And
I
don't feel like we need any more realism in the duality of man and darkness right now. I feel like the werewolf novels that I'm writing are a metaphorical, beast versus man. Who are the real monsters? And that definitely comes into play with especially a lot of the politics going along, lately.
Right.
And there is a lot of that. My book has a lot of politics in it. So that it's about warring werewolf clans. So.
Yeah, the intrigue that's involved behind that, though, the politics of like, who do we offend? Who do we not offend? Yeah, things like that. I find those books very intriguing because like, they're so hard to write, right? Like it's not easy to develop that intrigue and the cloak and daggerness of like behind the scenes of this guy seems like an ally, but then he turns out to not be,
Right.
Like, I always admire those kinds of books because I could never write.
I personally this is the first time I've ever written anything this in depth, and that's why it's taking me a little longer than I would normally take on my books. Normally my books are romance or they're fantasy with adventures and journeys, and you don't really need to dig too deep beneath the surface. This is really kind of new ground for me to explore a lot of those deeper feelings that I never really allowed myself to with simpler books. So this is my debut novel is going to be very intense, very, political intrigue. And it is very difficult to write because a lot of it is untangling your own thoughts. And sometimes you think you're going to go one route with something and realize, well, that just is not realistic. But sometimes the real stuff is scarier than the stuff that you can come up with.
Yeah.
So
100%.
But werewolves, to answer your question, werewolves.
Werewolves.
Yes.
Yeah, I think writing, sometimes we need to write something for us.
Yeah.
Like, I joke around that sometimes my characters will look over my shoulder at what I wrote and they're like, you going through some things? Like,
yes.
Like, did you do this to us because you're trying to work through some things right now? And I'm like, yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, the answer is always absolutely about to have a mentee be.
Those things don't always like make it to the final print, but like sometimes you have to explore that for yourself.
Yeah. And I have a lot of characters. It's like I believe there's 8 perspectives. It's similar to the way I describe my book is Game of Thrones meets Rise of the Lycans. So it's told in the perspective similarly in the vein of Game of Thrones, but it is about werewolf clans instead of human houses. And it touches on so many different subjects, alcoholism, grief. The biggest thing that when I tell people about my book, it's unraveling toxic masculinity, because you hear the term alpha and what's the first thing you think of aside werewolves?
Certain men.
Certain podcasters.
Yeah.
And so I like to tell people that my book is I'm trying to destigmatize the fact that alpha male does not inherently mean toxic masculinity. To be a leader does not mean that you have to be violent. And a lot of my characters do go through that. There is that, this is what the societal standard is of, I have to protect my people. I have to protect my, my home, my landing, my holdings.
Being a protector and a provider and all the
protector,
things
provider,
that masculinity.
But if you can't understand what affection looks like, and you're expected to suddenly take care of people who need that, how does that work for you in your world? Right. So that's kind of what my book touches on. And that is very, again, indicative of today's times.
Yeah.
So, that's essentially when I talk about my book, I like to tell people that it's even in my author bio, strength comes in many forms. I don't believe that strength is inherently physical. It doesn't mean that you have to push through things mentally. Being able to rely on others. And that's in my book. There are a lot of separation. There's borders that never used to exist before. Werewolves used to live in harmony all across the land. And suddenly now there's territories, and they have to keep maintaining this peace based off of a societal standard that they've now set for themselves. So
very tenuous piece. Yep. No, I love that, because like the whole thing, like I always say, like a good leader, like the characteristics when I think of a good leader, would never ask you to do something they're not willing to do. Like it has nothing to do with strength, it has nothing to do with power, and it has nothing to do with like good leadership to me is like being able to delegate, knowing that you're relying on other people and there's reasons for doing that, because everyone has strength on your team to do different things. So it's not about doing everything the best, doing it all yourself, being the strongest, most powerful.
It's not about bossing everyone around.
Yeah. A good leader is yes.
And there are some
team camaraderie builder.
There are some characters where the leadership is reluctant. They don't want the leadership. You may be thrust into that position, but just because you have the title king doesn't mean you want to be king. And another thing, you could think yourself a king even though no one else does. Does that mean that you're a king? So there is a lot of that in my book. What makes a leader, what makes a man strong, what makes a woman strong, and are those things inherently separate from each other? So, my book also touches
Right.
on, disability. How does, how can you be
Yeah.
a leader if you have disability? How does that look like for somebody in a society that values primal strength?
Right. Right.
If you're different, does that make you weaker? Does it make you stronger? Those are the kinds of things that
Right.
I like touching on in my books personally.
Yeah, no, I love exploring themes like that as well. Like, which is why I love young adult a lot of times when I'm
Oh
writing
yeah.
my fantasy, because it's just like, yes, doing what's right rather than what's easy. Everyday courage, things like that I really love to tackle.
I think young adult is perfect for that, because that the audience themselves are going through those figuring it out stages. But a
Yeah,
lot of
no, I love that exploration of self and who do I want to be. Yeah.
But I think it's important to bring those themes into adult books too, because just because you're an
Yeah.
adult doesn't mean you stop learning. It doesn't mean that you learned what you should have learned when you were a kid.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. We don't always get it right the first time around.
Yeah.
Or the second, or the third.
Right, right.
And that's totally valid. It's totally valid
until we learn. Yeah.
right.
I'm on
And
my 5th or 6th try. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get it
I
eventually.
think it's important to keep learning. And that's kind of my writing
Absolutely.
style too, is like, I've never published a book before. So
Okay,
this is
yeah,
all
yeah.
new to me. This is all like
Right.
I have restarted this book, I want to say like 4 times. I went from being modern day to, shopping centers and, cell phones and Lamborghinis, to medieval darkness, forests, it's gone through so many iterations, and I'm finally at a point now where I can picture my world,
Okay,
and I think if you can't
yeah.
picture your world, if you can't feel like you want to live there, you really can't write it.
Yeah, yeah. World building is super important for a lot of
Super
genres.
important. That's
Yeah.
kind of why I wrote the book that I'm writing now, is because as I was going through these iterations, I was thinking, there are so many paranormal romance werewolf smut books out there.
Right. No, I know
And
what you
just
mean. Yes.
none of them were hitting the lore heavy. I love supernatural stuff. I love, old Frankenstein, old Dracula. I love lore heavy worlds. And I really wasn't finding much for werewolves. So that's kind of
Right.
why I decided to go the route that I did with my book, is because, I wanted to write the kind of stuff I wanted to read. But I felt like at the beginning I was writing for other people, what I thought other people wanted to read.
Right.
And now I'm
I
finally
know what you mean.
confident enough to like really be in my world with my characters.
Yeah. So how did you get to that stage in the process though? Like what did you do to like finally be like, yes, I am solid
A lot
in
of
this
crying.
world? And yeah.
There you go.
A lot of crying, a lot of convincing myself not to give up.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Yep, a lot of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can relate a little bit. I didn't go through 4 iterations, but I went through like 2 or 3 for my first book, because I wrote the book and I was like, wait, this is book 2, not book 1. So then I wrote book 1, and then I was like, wait, I don't like the way I wrote it. So then I wrote it again, and then by the time I got to book 2, I wrote that again anyways. So I can relate to the like going through several starts and finishes even of a project. But I love that you have gained the confidence to be like, yes, I know what the story needs to be now, because I feel like so many writers struggle with imposter syndrome, and that's what we're all lacking, is that confidence to be like, I know myself and my story.
Well, I think even when you do know your story, you don't. And that's hard to describe to people who don't write or have no inclination towards creative hobbies like this. It's kind of like painting, where you could put blue down on a canvas, but you don't know if they're going to be mountains or sky.
Exactly.
You could have an idea, and that we can phrase that as confidence. But, let's say I decide to paint an ocean instead, even though it was going to be a sky. Now it's an ocean. You could change your ideas halfway through. And I don't think there's anything wrong or non-confident about changing things along the way. But it's frustrating to tell people that, like, I'm simultaneously confident and I also have imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Yes, I know what you mean, though. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean.
Because we read so many wonderful books, and we're
Mm.
comparing our draft to these finished, polished manuscripts.
Yeah.
And so you look at your draft and you're like, at what point is it polished enough to stand on its own, to be sent out into the world?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to lift your hands away from the keyboard and be, it's done.
Yeah.
Let it go.
That is so hard because you can keep going and going and going. Like you can go there. You
Infinitely.
hear people who've been working on something for 10 years and they're like, no, it's not ready yet. And,
Well, Tolkien he did not want to let go of his manuscript for Lord of the Rings. I think C.S. Lewis broke in and stole it and put it in the publisher
it for him.
Yeah, because he just wasn't ready, and he was never going to be ready, though.
No, because he wouldn't have been ready till he died. C.S. Lewis probably would have gone in there and stole it from his grave.
Right. I mean, yeah, he worked on some Silmarillion for the rest of his life. Just keep adding and editing.
Right.
Right.
And I feel like mine's never going to be done either. That's kind of how I like. Right. So my final iteration was in July this year. That's when I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to go. So I've only been working on this iteration for like a couple of months. Yeah. And I have broken pieces of chapters, and I've got a whole list of scenes that sound cool that I don't know will ever go in my story.
Right. Yeah. Well, interesting thing to keep in mind for marketing purposes, you could always have behind the scenes or bonus content that you use to like entice people with those cool scenes. Just an idea. But yes, no, it is writing is one of the most interesting things I think I've ever done, because it's like simultaneously you love it and hate it so much at the same time.
The amount of times I wanted to tear my hair out and just be like, I'm done. I'm not good enough.
You get done writing and you have that like adrenaline rush of like, I got the words down and they were good. And it's like the best feeling in the world. And you're just chasing that dragon the whole time. Yeah.
I have a really hard time with intuitive writing. I'm a plotter. I have a really hard time with intuitive writing. I have to know where my stories are going. I have to know like, if character A does this, what are the consequences for character A and B? Because that's going to be able to tell me if I need to introduce a resolution, or because I don't like, I can pick up on plot holes so quickly that it just, even now, like I could plot until the end of my days and I'll probably still have plot holes, but nothing will ever be perfect, and I have to just be okay with it. But I do plot out my summaries. I plot out my chapters, and there have been plenty of times where I'll write a summary for a chapter and I'll go, you know what? It doesn't work. Like what I wanted in chapter 3 after writing chapter 18, it doesn't work anymore. And then I have to rewrite chapter 6 and 7 to,
to get there.
That is so very relatable. I have a separate document where I put all the stuff that I've decided not to use. Or like if I rewrite the chapter, I put the old one in. And the document of my discarded stuff is easily twice as large as the actual print book.
Yeah.
Because I have to explore an area and be like, you know what, this is wrong, and back up. Try it again. It's closer. Back up, like okay, or just the plot holes. I had a character get kidnapped, and then after I got done writing it, I was like, she has magic, like
right.
Ain't that just the way?
I forgot about that little
magic she has.
Fact,
so I had to go back and rewrite it
again.
When I first wrote my character Astira, she was suffering from the redheaded heroine syndrome.
Okay, yeah.
So I changed that, and it ended up, I think I had to change like 3 whole chapters of every instance where it mentioned her hair. And I was like, I write about hair a lot. I need to change that.
Right.
But coming as a redheads, like a lot of times growing up, I felt like it was our one like most unique quality, and everybody hones in on that quality.
Yeah.
And so it actually like I had to learn to kind of grow beyond my hair, if that makes sense. Like stop
yeah.
You know, trying to be more than a it's really hard to explain.
No, I get it. I get it for sure.
You get it. That's what I'm saying. That like.
I think a lot of it is main character syndrome too. You think there's a reason that it's a term, you know, but it's a lot like anime too, where you get like the blue haired character, or you know, they have to stand out. And red hair is such a unique trait.
Out. There's no way to not stand out.
Yeah. I think that's definitely part of it.
Yes.
But I had to throw it out the window because I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's a rare trait too, the red hair.
Well, I've got red hair and hazel eyes, so my eyes are green blue. I guess that's a pretty rare combination.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't I had somebody mention it to me, and I hadn't even heard of it before this point. And I was like, I now knowing that cannot keep it. I can't keep it.
Yeah, I know what you mean though.
So now my main character, Astera, she has albinism, and I wanted to stray away from the using the character and her albinism as like a trope. You know, that was the biggest thing for me. So I've done a ton of research on my character and people, you know, readers who have albinism, and all of the stereotypes that they are seeing, and they're like, we don't want to be seen like this. So I think it's especially important, you know, this is just, you know, in terms of hair, but as a redheaded woman, knowing, you know, being made fun of for having red hair.
Yes. You
can see how
you're fetishized, you're targeted.
Yep. Yes. Oh, fetishization of redheads is ridiculous. In Costco, I got asked if the carpet matched the drapes by an old man. And I was like, I hope you have a redheaded grandchild one day. And she tells you, you know? So I can understand. Obviously, I am not marginalized in any other way other than red hair. I can't speak to marginalization or stereotyping of any other minority group. I really can't. And so I try to do as much research as I can. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's just the reality of it. I could say that I didn't mean something or that I didn't intend on something, but that doesn't mean that I didn't hurt people in the process. All I can do is try and prepare. So as far as my character with albinism, I made sure that the change was made for a reason and not just because I wanted her to be unique. I didn't want her to have redhead syndrome, right? So
I'm going to skip this next part, but I'm laughing hysterically because my main character has white hair. And I was like, I couldn't make it red, so I made it white. And you're like, well, I made it white. And I was like,
Yep, that sounds about right. Yep. Yes. But I think it's important to
white-haired and red-haired anime characters, right?
Right. Well, and a lot of times, I will say this, a lot of times from my research, people with white hair are villains.
Right.
Or they are put up on pedestals as religious figures. They're considered pure. And that is something that I have learned through my research with people with albinism. And another thing,
they're considered magical in certain underdeveloped regions in the world where there's still the belief of like witchcraft and different things. Like people will get murdered for being albino
in Africa, especially. There's
because there's the idea that their bones or their materials are have magical properties,
and it's important to note those things. Like going down to a less serious stereotype would be, for example, that, you know, the term albino is there's a lot of contention in the community of people with albinism because some people don't like to be called albino. That's a term we use for animals. And that's how, you know, they're considered othered by that. Some people don't care, and that's not for me to decide one way or another. But knowing that it does exist and that it would alienate a group of people, I will not be calling her albino. Another thing too is that the belief that people with albinism have red eyes. They don't. That's an animalistic trait.
Or purple eyes, right?
It's because there's no pigment in the eye, the light that's reflecting off of things.
It's their blood, right?
Right. It's creating that illusion of violet or of blue. But my character, Astira, does have red eyes. And that is because she is part animal. She's a werewolf.
Sure.
So that is the one trait I did keep, but I will not be referring to her as albino. And it does worry me that at some point someone's going to go, oh, well, yeah, you're still considering her as an animal. But the difference is that everyone in my world is an animal.
Yeah.
So like that, she's not special in that regard. She's not the only person.
You're not othering. Yeah, you're not othering.
And the other thing too is paying attention to the disabilities that come with the condition. You know, for example, poor eyesight, you know, skin sensitivity, those sorts of things. And those are addressed in the book. You know, she does have those issues.
Yeah. I actually have known a person with albinism in my life.
Okay.
And it's so interesting because I think because most people don't know someone with albinism, like you wouldn't know their daily struggles. Like they would go grocery shopping and it would take them an hour and a half because their vision, you know, was very, very affected when the light sensitivity of like trying to read labels and pick the right object. But they were just so independent and very like driven. But it was so funny because I met them because they started dating somebody I knew, and they were saying going grocery shopping with them, like they got done in like 20 minutes and they were like, what even? Like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
But like, you know, it was just so,
it's just something you don't think about.
Yeah. Because
you don't think
I had
about
no
because,
idea. And they had like the eye movement as
I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's kind of like
Right.
astigmatism, but it's a visible.
Yes, it's the little eye movements back and forth.
I'm so sorry, I don't remember the term for it. But basically,
it's okay. But yeah, it was just so interesting because that's not something I'd ever considered. Of that lack of melanin in the eye would mean like your vision is going to be struggling to see things because all the light coming in and all the other issues involved with vision. So yeah, no, that's I love that you have that character that has struggles like that, you know what I mean? But you talk about like the disabled leader and what does that look like still being a leader. I love that.
She grew up in the South where the sun is bright and, you know, she's got to wear like a veil, you know, when she goes outside and she has to wear like these dresses that are like all the way up to here. And then she ends up in the North where it's mostly blotted out by like the mountainous clouds. And she's like, oh, I can go outside. That doesn't mean that she's not affected by the sun. Sun still comes down through the clouds, but she doesn't have to dress as nearly as concealed as she used to. So it's taking into account those things because there's a lot of low level light up where she's at now. And she's just not used to being able to see things as clearly. That doesn't mean that she can see, you know, perfect 20/20 anymore, but yeah, so those are the kind of the things that I touch on.
Showing those struggles is great, though, to bring realism to the world and all of that stuff, too.
Yeah, and being able to take criticism that if someone comes up to me and says, hey, you did this wrong, okay. Like, obviously, once my book is published, there's nothing I can do about it except for address it after the fact. You can only, again, prepare for so much. And one could argue that, well, you just shouldn't write about characters like that. But I think that does a disservice to people who need representation also. You know, and that's self-serving in my own way to saying I just don't want to change my character, right? But so long as I do everything in my power to not what's the word? To not perpetuate the stereotype. You know, I can do as much as I can. That's it.
Yes.
I will say though that oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say every conversation that I've had with people from marginalized communities, like the message I have received over and over again is like, nobody wants you to not write about marginalized characters or marginalized communities. Like everyone wants that representation. It's just certain stories are maybe not everyone's to tell. Like if you don't have experience with racism, like, why would you tell a story about living and dealing with racism every day?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that might be maybe not the best avenue, but like I said, from everyone I've ever had conversations with, it's always like, yeah, please write these characters, please write them respectfully, get sensitivity readers, like things like that. Nobody is like, don't write the story with that character.
I will say that in terms of the racism, for example, sometimes there's subtle racism that you don't realize you're putting into your books. For example, the big villain, right? You could like, for example, there are many clans in my book, all with different, you know, physical features and things that make them unique based on their cultures. And one of the things that I realized is that the characters that are villainized in the beginning of the book for most of the South are darker skinned. And I was like, oh, that's a problem. I'm not about that. So being able to recognize that when you're doing those things, that is racism at its core, even if you don't realize that it is at first. That's why sensitivity readers are so important, because you may not realize or think that that's a problem, but it is. And being able to listen to that feedback and go, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to change that. So I didn't realize that was an issue until it was. And being okay, I have another clan in my story, and they're not villains, but they are dark skinned. However, they have blonde hair. And I've been told that oftentimes can be seen as like another form of racism, where, well, they can't just be black, you know, that sort of, you have to other them or make them lighter in some way to make them palatable to other audiences. And I wasn't aware of that. In my book, the reason for it is because their werewolf forms are golden wolves, and their hair matches their fur. But they live in a region where their melanin would be very dark. So either I can
have that, where their skin is dark, their hair that is light, right?
Right. But I have been told that that sometimes that can be seen as racism, is when you have someone who's darker skinned but lighter hair, or they're darker skinned but they have light eyes. That's whitewashing black people. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. That is, I want to be very clear that I still have not decided whether or not I'm going to continue keeping that blonde hair aspect of those characters. This is still very much in progress, and I plan to get sensitivity readers for that. But
the thing that comes to my mind as you discuss this is like Northern African people, for example, where you can have somebody who's got the deeper color skin tones, but they might have light hair or light eyes.
There is a tribe that has
people.
There's black skin with blonde hair, and there is a tribe. So, and I did know that, and that's kind of where I touched base with the person who had mentioned it to me, and I had showed her that I did know about this tribe that existed, and I could easily say like, yeah, they're based off of that tribe. I didn't know anything about that tribe. You know, I could say that they're based off of a tribe that exists, but that would be doing, again, a disservice to a marginalized community that I know nothing about. So
there are several islanders as well who have a lot of like when you get a lot of mixed races that all came together on an island, you get like all kinds of different combinations that are more unusual. And then you have the fantasy aspect that gets into it. And
but you can make them blue. You can make them blue. You can make them purple. They don't.
Yes.
Right. So, but then you could argue, okay, like, are the darker purple people evil if the lighter purple ones are good? You know, you could really go deeper than that if you wanted to, based on, you know, the saturation of a person's skin tone. But the reality is that it's not for me to decide. And that's why sensitivity readers are important. So
absolutely, I 100% always support people who seek that avenue of help and extra care in their writing of getting those sensitivity readers, because like you said, there's so many small little things that we're not even aware of or conscious of sometimes. Yes, exactly, those biases that we just don't know about. But yeah, I think that there is obviously sensitivity readers will have that valid input of telling you like, hey, maybe watch out for this or consider this aspect while you're writing. But I like that you're not afraid. I'm glad you're not afraid of writing it wrong and therefore just avoiding it altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's really important too.
Again, it's the fine line of, do you want to represent a group or do you want to just avoid the controversy?
Right.
You do have to make those decisions, and hopefully you can make them informed by speaking to people who actually know what they're talking about because they live those lives.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or you could just make an informed decision and do it anyway, because that's your right as an author. That's your right as someone who has, free will. Me, on the other hand, I would much rather reach out to people who are affected or would be affected by my stories. Another big one is mental health. I personally go through, I have anxiety, depression, I've got PTSD. Those are things that I struggle with, but my condition and what I go through is not the same as everyone else who has these same conditions. So I can't account for everybody. I can only account for my own.
There's no monolith. Yeah.
Right. So that's all I can do is say I tried and I did everything that I could. I will not always be right. And I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong.
Yeah,
that's all I can do.
Wonderful. That's a great attitude to have. Like, we should all be teachable and we should all be open. I think the downfall of maybe getting older is getting rigid, where we're not as open-minded, we're not as teachable, we're not as open to those adjustments and changes and adaptations as society and everything else changes. Like, I hope to always be open and teachable. Yeah.
Right. Well, and then also too, as a white female author, we oversaturate the market. We really do. And so we have louder voices, unfortunately. And when we start putting those things out into the market that this is popular, people will follow. So you have to see your privilege for what it is and be willing to not do those same things, even if it doesn't mean you don't get as popular. It's the right thing to do.
Right. And privileges doesn't mean you didn't have any struggles, right? Yeah.
No, I don't believe that, this is probably the conversation we'll be delving too deeply into, but no, privilege does not mean that you did not struggle. I don't believe that I am not privileged, even though I have struggled very much in my life.
No. Yeah. I just to be clear, because that's the common argument that I hear from others.
No, I'm a white woman. My voice is pretty loud.
I've struggled with life. Yes, you have struggles, but it's just like your struggles are not because of a characteristic.
This thing. Yeah. I am. Huh?
You didn't have that struggle.
I didn't have that
struggle. Yeah.
I am a white woman, and my voice is louder than those of Black women and people of color, and that is the unfortunate fact of our society. And I do lift up people of color as much as I can. There's actually a book, Lore of the Wildes. Have you guys heard of it?
No.
Oh my God. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. I'm gonna look up her name again. Lore of Wildes by, I apologize, I'm gonna butcher her name. Annalie Sabrana. Okay. It is so good. Black female author. It's about an enchanted library, 2 handsome fae men. And a human who brings them all together. But the library has like a deadly enchantment. So it's wonderful. But I can't say that like every step of the way I uplift every single Black author that I see. I'm not a significant voice in the community right now. I just know that my voice is a little bit louder, and all I can do is lift people up as I see them and as I can.
And that's what I love about the writing community is like we really have all embraced the like rising tide lifts all boats, and it's for everyone. There's no gatekeeping. It's we reach out and we help.
Well, there is.
I mean, yes, of course. When you get into like the traditional publishing of it, there is a huge amount of gatekeeping. I mean, the writing community that I've grown to love. When I talk to most writers, we work a lot with indie authors, and so nobody's gatekeeping in the fact that everyone's saying, like, how do I publish this book? There's so many steps I didn't even know were involved.
Yeah.
Everyone gives that information pretty
Yes.
readily in
Yes.
the community that I've grown to love. And so, yeah, of course, when you talk about systemic things or like the traditional publishing route, there's a huge amount of gatekeeping. I just mean within the community
Within
of
the,
writers. They've been really great about rising tide lifts all boats.
There is definitely your win is my win. That's how I see the indie community is.
Yeah, so we don't see each other as competition, right?
No, I do see it. Unfortunately, I do see it a lot in the book talk and the Bookstagram community, the toxicity that lies there. But that's any community. I feel like there are always going to be those outliers. But as far as I'm concerned, the majority of the time I see people go, oh, I got, an agent, and you got thousands of comments going, that's awesome. Congratulations. A win is a win. A win for you is a win for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's what I really do love about the book community, is that we are genuinely here to help each other out.
Yes. And nobody, like I said, everyone's like, oh, you do this in the stage of like KDP publishing. You know what I mean? Everyone's really great about giving answers for those crazy, like, which do I choose? White or cream pages? Like, if you don't know the nitty gritty, like, I love that everyone.
There are really so many self-help books out there too.
Yeah.
A lot of people are just willing to put that information out for free, which I love. I haven't decided if I'm going to do self-publishing or the traditional route. I might query for agents and see if I'm going to go the traditional route. I would love to. But I also know, you also have to read into the pros and cons, and there is a lot of information in the indie community.
Yeah. I think it depends on what your goals are. Like, if your goal is to have that creative control of, I set my schedule. I set the publishing schedule. I know when book 2 is going to come out. It's up to me what the cover looks like. It's up to me what remains in the story. Like, I'm going to get editing, but like, I want that executive decision over it. If you really like that type of control, obviously self-publishing is the best way to go. But I think that if you're worried about, like, I need the expertise from somebody else, of an editor or like somebody who knows this publishing process, and I really want to rely on their expertise, go with the traditional publishing route. It just really depends on what your goals are for your story. And I think it also, like, if you a lot of people have the idea of like, oh, I don't want to do marketing, so I'm going to do traditional publishing. Well, they don't market for you either.
No,
they're not going to do that for you either. Like,
so
it used to be that way. It used to be where they would do a lot more.
It's the whole industry is sort of changing on that front.
Yeah, I will say that there's been a lot of pushback. So, a couple of things. Self-publishing isn't a death sentence anymore. It used to be that you would self-publish and then you would
have any credibility.
No, and then that book, that title that you're working on, could never be picked up. It would never be touched because it already had an IP out there. Now that's not the case. There are plenty of self-published authors who are getting traditional publishing deals now, and that's fantastic. I think that that's fantastic that we have that opportunity now, but that's only because publishing houses are starting to realize that we are the majority voice now.
Yeah. Well, and the nice thing about self-publishing too is that you don't have someone telling you the story will or will not sell. You get to tell what story you want to tell.
Yes.
And then the audience will or will not find it.
And that's the other thing with publishing too.
That's been so different than traditional publishing, because it used to be like, we're only selling werewolf books this year. We're only selling witch books this year and stuff like that. Like, it would really pigeonhole what was coming out and therefore what you were writing. So I love that self-publishing is so everywhere now that you can like write the story you want to write without worrying about like.
And it does linger, but it's a lot less now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's why a lot of people, they try to do the traditional publishing route first. I think that's what I've seen for the majority of people that I've spoken to, is they do try to do traditional first, but failing that, they'd rather just have the story out. And I agree. I think that if it comes around to me that traditional publishing just isn't in the cards for me after, a certain amount of queries, and I'm like, okay, I'm antsy, I want to get this book out, I probably will self-publish. And that's just the reality of it, because I'm not limited the way that I used to be. I will say though that like there's a lot of indie authors now, their books are getting pirated, and there's the scandal of returning KDP books, and so that does concern me, and I hope that in the future Amazon and similar audiobook
we'll take
sites, they
writers
fix
into
it.
account. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Because right now it's just about making the customers happy rather than like the writers getting what they
it's quantity over quality.
Yes. Yeah. And if they can push the cost onto the author, then they've lost nothing.
They will. Right. Right.
I mean, one can hope that we're gonna get a different company that's willing to step up and be the new self-published author place.
Yeah.
But Amazon will always beat in price. And that's what readers ultimately are going to go for, because who's going to say no to a free Kindle Unlimited book that they get to rent for a little bit? And that's the unfortunate part. It takes two to tango, and if the readers aren't paying, then the authors can't write.
It's definitely not a perfect system, right? Very few things are perfect in this world, unfortunately.
Well, take a look at movies.
Yes, right. Yeah. I do see a lot of changes happening throughout the industry that are, I think, the right direction, though. As far as like self-publishing not carrying that huge stigma that it used to, and things like people being exposed to more and more variety of stuff.
I'm trying to remember which publishing company I think it was Schuster. They recently put out how to self-publish. It was like a blog that they put out.
Yeah.
I thought it was ironic, because you got to imagine that those blog posts are probably geared towards making it seem like it's impossible, or their authors that they're getting. So you have to realize that the traditional publishers, as much as they're being willing to work with indie authors, they're also still trying to keep themselves relevant.
Going, yes.
They're not there to help you. Necessarily. They will help you, obviously, if they're one of your authors, but they are a business. At the end of the day, they are a business. And it doesn't matter. And there's a reason why it's a running joke that quality doesn't really matter in the book if it's not sellable. And that's the content could be amazing. You could have another Lord of the Rings on your hands, but if it's not elf season, they're not going to buy your book.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes. Sometimes they're only looking for certain kinds of stories, and that, it doesn't matter what the quality of your book is. They're looking for what they know will sell. They make safe choices, not as daring.
I mean, we know that Fae are really popular right now, but they're not buying Fae books right now because the market is oversaturated, and it will be over the next 2 years. Yeah, we'll see a shift over to probably vampires again very soon.
Right? Yeah, they do their cycles of what's in season, and
I have noticed. I have noticed that there are a lot of werewolf movies coming out, so I'm hoping it's my time.
Yes, you're coming out right when the scene's fresh and open. Yeah.
Watch, I'm gonna be right in the market after it leaves.
Oh
and that is the tricky part about trying to write to market, is by the time you catch up to the trend, they've already moved on.
Yep. Well, it's usually a year ahead of time. They know what the markets are going to be. So by the time you're finished, by the time I'm finished writing my werewolf novel, then, you've got 16 werewolf books out on the market. Let's say another book company, Schuster or whatever, buys my book because werewolves are in season right now, but it's going to take another year for them to print and publish my book.
Yes.
Because that's how long it takes. People think that you get published and then it's just going to take 2-3 months. No, they buy your book.
It's a year to 2 years. Yes.
Yep. They buy your book. They got to go through the editing process with their in-house editors,
all of that.
Formatting, book cover. And then by the time all of that's done and you make the changes on the edits that their publishing editors want you to make, it's been a year or two. So,
That's what I mean. Like, if you want control over the timeline of things, self-publishing is a great option.
You did the TLDR.
You can decide, yes, you can decide that, hey, I want this to come out in 6 months and not go through all the rigmarole with the traditional publishing schedule, because they have to fit you into their slots too.
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit. I know we've been having this amazing conversation for a while now, but tell us a little bit about. We already talked a little bit about writing process, right? About how you get from idea to finished draft.
Just a lot of crying,
plotting.
Oh yes, yes, yes. All right.
Or that too.
Yeah.
There is a lot of crying. Yes.
There's a lot of.
We cry, we pace, we talk to ourselves, we daydream.
We scream into the void. Yeah.
I just got back from a week-long writing retreat, and I remember the 3rd or 4th day I wrote 3 chapters in a week, and that is a lot. That is me sitting down, and it doesn't matter what words come out, it's getting down. Doesn't mean that it was all good, but it was 3 chapters. And I remember it was like the 4th or the 5th day, because I stayed there for 7 days. 4th or 5th day, I woke up that morning and I was trying to write for like an hour, and I finally just threw my notebook and I sat on the couch and I cried. I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of that. So
yeah, no, I was gonna ask, what have you learned from the writing process and the endeavor of writing this book? Like, what has the writing taught you?
To be patient, as much as it sucks. And I don't mean just a lot of waiting. I mean being patient with your level of experience, being patient with the words that won't come, being patient with the ideas that you have stuck. And it doesn't matter how you get them down, but getting them down and then coming back later, that takes time and it takes patience, because the amount of times I have to just, like Goku summon the spirit bomb within my body and just harness the energy to get that stuff out on paper, but then also the energy it takes to go back to it and to not just go, this is all garbage, and throw it away. That takes patience.
Right. Yes. Right.
So many times I've written stuff and I went, what was I on?
Right.
Did a 10-year-old write this?
It gets you to where you need to be, though. Getting it out, even the bad, like the messy thoughts, getting it out of your head, it will help lead you to the right word that you need. I feel
this is something that especially this last week, is very true for me. You need to convince yourself that first draft writing quality is not third draft writing quality. It is. They are not the same thing. They are not. Nope.
No,
you can't just
called rough drafts for a reason.
Mantra. I'm like, let it suck. Let it suck.
Let it suck.
Let it suck.
Mine is be bad at it. It's okay. Be bad. Be bad at it.
Let it be terrible. All it has to do is exist. All you have to do is try, get it down. Later, you can polish it later.
And it's the fixing it later
story to fix later.
It's the fixing it later that also requires patience. It's the going back over it and going, I've already gone through this like 12 times. Like
you read your story 100 times at least.
Yes.
And you still don't know it by the end of it.
Oh, I don't know. I get to the point where I'm like, I hate it. It's time to send it to the editor, right? Like, I cannot look at this one more time. I need a break. I'm sending it to the editor.
I'm in the process of writing my blurb. And if you've written a blurb,
that's painful.
You don't know your story, no matter how much you tell yourself.
The book seems so easy when it comes time to write that stupid blurb, and you're just like,
I've considered hiring somebody.
Words, but
I've considered hiring somebody to do it for me, because I'm done. I can't look at the summary anymore and try and parse down words to make it sound palatable. Because you try and take 8 perspectives in a book and make it a blurb
and make it 200 words. Yeah.
It's not. I've done the thing where I'll look at other books that are very similar. Game of Thrones, for example, they just give a very brief summary.
Right.
But it's not the same. It's not.
No, you want it to be engaging. You want it to reflect the tone and writing of the novel. There's so much that goes into blurbs, right?
Oh my God. It's an art of its own. It is.
And it completely has nothing to do with writing the novel.
No.
Because you can master writing the novel, you have not mastered writing the blurb. Yeah.
The blurb requires a mastery of marketing, and
yes.
Nope, that's not. I mean, I would say that I'm relatively new to marketing. I did not do a lot of social media before I started writing this.
Sure, yeah.
And I feel like now I've gotten to a point with my social media where I've got enough followers where I feel confident, but not enough to where I feel set, you know, that those numbers, even if they go down by five followers, I'm like, what did I do wrong?
Right, I know what you mean.
But blurb writing is a mastery of marketing, and I'm not a master at it. And you really do have to reach out to people who are better at it than you. And otherwise, I will spend days. I have spent days writing or coming up with a graphic for my Instagram page for my book.
Yep.
And that's 3 days that I spent on a graphic and not writing.
Yes, I know what you mean.
So I can tell you with my latest book that just came out, what I did is I wrote the blurb as best I could, and then I sent it to Julia. And Julia made some changes and
Julia
and gave me some advice.
Yes.
And then I took it and I gave it to my other friend and I said, what do you think? And she made some adjustments and I took the ones that I liked and I was like, yeah, this is good. And then I gave it to my other writing friend, Kate, who went through and made some bigger changes. And then I went to Vicky and everyone has their own strengths and everyone had something to contribute that I'm like, you know what? The way you phrased this was better. It's the same thing, but it's better. So I have this community of wonderful author friends who each gave me something of themselves for my blurb.
And that's so nice, though.
It got better. It got better until the point where I was like, you know what? I'm actually proud of this. And so my first blurb that I had to write, again, it took days of just agonizing and everything. This third blurb that I had to write, it took me a couple of hours because I have amazing friends who will sort of drop everything to help me out. And it's so much more fun to write somebody else's blurb than it is your own.
Yeah.
I think
I will be messaging you after the show.
Story.
Right.
There is so many little things that you want to put into here, but you only have 250 words ish,
Yeah. Well, and it's hard to know what is too much, what's not enough.
Yes,
I've sent my blurb to a couple of my writer friends. I actually had one. She was kind enough to be like, well, do you want me to try and rewrite it for you and see if it would if it strikes the vibe for you? And I was like, you don't have to, you don't feel obligated to. And I'm that kind of person where I'm like, I'm ecstatic when anybody wants to read anything that I have. You could tell me it's going to take you 2 months to read it, and I'll be like, great, I'll see you in 2 months.
Oh yeah,
but it's never.
It's been years, and I'm like, it's okay. The book won't expire. You get to it when you get to it. Heck, the might be out, and then you'll have the whole series to just devour when you're
ready. Yeah. But to have somebody in your life who's willing to take a look at your stuff and actually give you feedback, and not just it's good.
You can trust.
Yeah, it's good. I like it.
They'll tell you it's amazing and it's wonderful. They'll make you feel good, and you need that. But is it necessarily useful feedback?
Yep. I thankfully have a varied group of people, and I say group, but it's two or three people who I can go to, and I go, hey, I have this snippet of a chapter. Would you mind looking at it? Does it make sense? Or is it too lighthearted for this situation? Do you think it should be darker? I actually had somebody, I sent them a snippet a couple days ago, and I wanted to know if a scene was too lighthearted. And she said, Evelyn, if this is too lighthearted for you, I'm scared.
Right.
So I was like, I'm going to put that on my resume.
Yeah. It is so scary to be the one who calls the shots. In your job, in other aspects of your life, there's always another level of person you have to get permission from, or someone to run things by. Being at the top, being the one to make the decisions is so scary. Because I'm one of those people that I feel like I need permission of is this okay? Can I do this? Is this too lighthearted? Is it too dark? Am I allowed to do this? And you have to take a deep breath and go you know what? It's your decision.
And
you have to take responsibility for that decision, and it's so scary.
But it's terrifying at the same time.
The decision paralysis is I believe the term.
I get decision fatigue so much. Yeah.
Yep. I get that a lot. And there have been times where I will get feedback from someone who says, well, I just didn't like it, or it didn't vibe with me, or there was this one part that I thought was kind of off. I think you should change it. And really just giving yourself permission to go, no, I think you're wrong. Like, just because feedback was given to you doesn't mean you have to take it.
There's the famous quote that, like, if someone tells you something's not working, you should listen because they're usually right. But if they tell you how to fix it, they're usually wrong, right?
Yeah.
So if they say, like, oh, this part, just, like, there's something off about this scene, like, or this character or this moment, like, yes, they're probably very valid. Something's wrong that needs to be tweaked. But, like, if they tell you how to fix it or what to do, then oftentimes you're just like, yeah, I'm going to do my own thing.
And I think there's a difference between getting feedback from another writer and, for example, beta readers. Beta readers will often say things like, well, I think it's good, but something feels off. And I've heard from writers who are like, well, that doesn't help me. Well, yeah, they're not writers. They don't know how to fix it because they're not going to speak to you in writer language. They're going to speak to you in reader language. This feels off could mean pacing is off. The vibes don't feel good.
Maybe the characters feel forced.
Right. Conversation dialogue seems sticky, but you as the author have to figure that out. And you could go through several different iterations and you could have varying responses from your readers. Some will love one version, some will love another, and you may have one that's universally hated, so you know not to use that one. But ultimately, the final decision comes down to you. Do you like it? Does it vibe for you?
And knowing your reasons why someone's against it, reason why someone's suggesting a change, reasons why you want to keep it the way it is.
Well, there's context. There's context too, because you might send someone one chapter not knowing that something else is going to happen to answer their questions 3 chapters later.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, we have had an absolutely fabulous conversation with you. We want to give you an opportunity to tell us more about you and your book coming out, and where we can find out more about you online.
You can find me on Instagram under wilde.imagination, and that's Wilde spelt WILDE .imagination. I'm also on Blue Sky and X, formerly known as Twitter. The Twitter name is wild.ride because Wild Imagination was already taken.
Sure.
But yeah, you can find me over there. I'm most active on my Instagram page. I will say that much. About my book, the novel is set in a fictional continent called Hedin. It's a medieval society where 6 Lycan clans maintain an uneasy peace after centuries of conflict known as the Territory Wars. In the north, there is the isolated Blackwood clan. They battle a hidden threat, ferals. There's these creatures, these twisted creatures called ferals that they've been fighting them for centuries, but they're evolving into something beyond their mindless hunger that they are known for, into something far more dangerous and intelligent. The southern clans, there's 5 of them. They remain ignorant to this growing darkness in the north. So they think that the only monsters that exist in the north are the Blackwood clan. As a civil war threatens to destabilize the South, a political summit draws the North and South into an unexpected confrontation after centuries of being isolated from each other. And then when Kaiser, the ruthless ruler of Blackwood, and Astera, the daughter of Guildvale's ruler, it's a clan in the South, discover that they're bound by fate, they're fated mates. Both sides of the divide must face the truth. The war that they thought was over has only just begun. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Sounds fascinating.
Sorry, I know that was really forced. Like I said, I just wrote my summary literally today. So.
No, it was very good.
Thank you.
We want to say thank you for joining us tonight, taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the show. We appreciate having you as a guest.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys letting me join in so last minute.
No, we loved it. We had absolutely a great conversation, and we have really enjoyed this. So thank you to you again, and thanks to everyone who's listening along at home. Remember, there's more than one way up the mountain. And if our next episode releases Friday as usual. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, you can find us on social media at The Tell Not Show or email us at thetellnotshow@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to 4, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.